of Beren and Lúthien. Among the tales of sorrow and of ruin that come down to us from the darkness of those days, there are yet some in which amid weeping there is joy, and under the shadow of death light that endures. And of those histories most fair still in the ears of the elves is the tale of Beren and Lúthien. Of their lives was made the Lay of Lúthien, release from bondage, which is the longest save one of the songs concentrating the world of old. But here the tale is told in fewer words and without a song. It has been told that Barahir would not forsake Dorthonion, and there Morgoth pursued him to the death, until at last there remained to him only 12 companions. Now the forest of Dorthonion rose southward into mountainous moors, and in the east of those highlands there lay a lake with wild heaths about it, and all that land was pathless and untamed, for even in the days of the long peace none had dwelt there. But the waters of Tarn Aelion were held in reverence, for they were clear and blue by day, and by night were a mirror for the stars. And it was said that Melian herself had hallowed that water in days of old. Thither Barahir and his outlaws withdrew, and made their lair, and Morgoth could not discover it. But the rumour of the deeds of Barahir and his companions went far and wide, and Morgoth commanded Sauron to find them and destroy them. Now, among the companions of Barahir was Gorlim, son of Angrim. His wife was named Elinel, and their love was great, ere evil befell. But Gorlim, returning from the war upon the marches, found his house plundered and forsaken, and his wife gone, whether slain or taken he knew not. Then he fled to Barahir. Of his companions he was the most fierce and desperate, but doubt gnawed his heart, thinking that perhaps Elinel was not dead. At times he would depart alone and secretly, and visit his house, but still stood amid the fields and woods he had once possessed. And this became known to the servants of Morgoth. On the time of autumn he came in the dusk of evening, and drawing near he saw, as he thought, a light at the window, and coming warily he looked within. There he saw Elinel, and her face was worn with grief and hunger, and it seemed to him that he heard her voice lamenting that he had forsaken her. But even as he cried aloud, the light was blown out in the wind. Wolves howled, and on his shoulders he felt suddenly the heavy hands of Sauron's hunters. 'Twas Gorlim was ensnared, and taking him to their camp, they tormented him, seeking to learn the hidings of Barahir and all his ways. But nothing would Gorlim tell. Then they promised him that he should be released and restored to Elinel if he would yield, and being at last worn with pain and yearning for his wife, he faltered. Then straightway they brought him into the dreadful presence of Sauron, and Sauron said, "I hear now that thou wouldst barter with me. What is thy price?" And Gorlim answered that he should find Elinel again, and with her be set free, but he thought that Elinel also had been made captive. Then Sauron smiled, saying, "That is a small price for so great a treachery. So shall it surely be, say on." Now Gorlim would have drawn back, but daunted by the eyes of Sauron, he told at last all that he would know. Then Sauron laughed, and he mocked Gorlim, and revealed to him that he had seen only a phantom devised by wizardry to entrap him, for Elinel was dead. None the less, I would grant thy prayer, said Sauron, and thou shalt go to Eiluned, and be set free of my service. Then he put him cruelly to death. In this way the hiding of Barahir was revealed, and Morgoth drew his net about it, and the orcs, coming in the still hours before dawn, surprised the men of Dorthonion, and slew them all save one. For Beren, son of Barahir, had been sent by his father on a perilous errand to spy upon the ways of the enemy, and he was far afield when the lair was taken. But as he slept benighted in the forest, he dreamed that carrion birds sat thick as leaves upon bare trees beside a mere, and blood dripped from their beaks. Then Beren was aware in his dream of a form that came to him across the water, and it was a wraith of Gorlim, and it spoke to him declaring his treachery and death, and bade him make haste to warn his father. Then Beren awoke and sped through the night, and came back to the lair of the outlaws on the second morning. But as he drew near, the carrion birds rose from the ground, and sat in the alder trees beside Tarn Eolian, and croaked in mockery. There Beren buried his father's bones, and raised a cairn of boulders above him, and swore upon it an oath of vengeance. First therefore he pursued the orcs that had slain his father and his kinsmen, and he found their camp by night at Rivel's well above the fen of Serech. And because of his woodcraft he came near to the fire unseen. There their captain made boast of his deeds, and he held up the hand of Barahir that he had cut off as a token for Sauron, that their mission was fulfilled, and the ring of Felagund was on that hand. Then Beren sprang from behind a rock and slew the captain, and taking the hand and the ring he escaped, being defended by fate, for the orcs were dismayed and their arrows wild. Therefore, for 4 years more, Beren wandered still upon Dorthonion, a solitary outlaw, but he became the friend of birds and beasts, and they aided him, and did not betray him, and from that time forth he ate no flesh, nor slew any living thing that was not in the service of Morgoth. He did not fear death, but only captivity, and being bold and desperate, he escaped both death and bonds. And the deeds of lonely daring that he achieved were noised abroad throughout Beleriand, and the tale of them came even into Doriath. At length Morgoth set a price upon his head, no less than the price upon the head of Fingon, High King of Noldor. But the orcs fled rather at the rumour of his approach than sought him out. Therefore an army was sent against him under the command of Sauron, and Sauron brought werewolves, fell beasts, inhabited by dreadful spirits that he had imprisoned in their bodies. All that land was now become filled with evil, and all clean things were departing from it. And Beren was pressed so hard that at last he was forced to flee from Dorthonion. In time of winter and snow he forsook the land and grave of his father, and climbing into the high regions of Gorgoroth, the mountains of terror, he descried afar the land of Doriath. There it was put into his heart that he would go down into the hidden kingdom where no mortal foot had yet trodden. Terrible was the southward journey. Sheer were the precipices of Ered Gorgoroth, and beneath their feet were shadows that were laid before the rising of the moon. Beyond lay the wilderness of Dungorfeb, where the sorcery of Sauron, power of Melian came together, and horror and madness walked. There spiders of the fell race of Ungoliant abode, spinning their unseen webs in which all living things were snared, and monsters wandered there that were born in the long dark before the sun, hunting silently with many eyes. No food for elves or men was there in that haunted land, but death only. That journey is not accounted least among the great deeds of Beren, but he spoke of it to no one after, lest the horror return into his mind, and none know how he found a way, and so came to pass that no man nor elf else ever dared to tread to the borders of Doriath. And he passed through the mazes of Melian, wove about the kingdom of Thingol, even as she foretold, for a great doom lay upon him. It is told in the lay of Lúthien that Beren came stumbling into Doriath grey, and bowed as with many years of woe, so great had been the torment of the road. But wandering in the summer in the woods of Neldereth, he came upon Lúthien, daughter of Thingol and Melian, at a time of evening under moonrise, as she danced upon the unfading grass in the glades beside Esgaldoin. Then all memory of his pain departed from him, and he fell into an enchantment, for Lúthien was the most beautiful of all the children of Ilúvatar. Blue was her raiment as she unclouded heaven, but her eyes were grey as a starlit evening. Her mantle was sown with golden flowers, but her hair was dark as the shadows of twilight. As the light upon the leaves of trees, as the voice of clear waters, as the stars above the mists of the world, such was her glory and her loveliness, and in her face was a shining light. But she vanished from his sight, and he became dumb, as one that is bound under a spell, and he strayed long in the woods, wild and weary as a beast, seeking for her. In his heart he called her Tunuviel, that signifies nightingale, daughter of twilight, in the grey elven tongue. For he knew no other name for her, and he saw her afar as leaves in the winds of autumn, and in winter as a star upon a hill, but a chain was upon his limbs. There came a time near dawn on the eve of spring, and Lúthien danced upon a green hill, and suddenly she began to sing. Keen, heart-piercing was her song, as the song of the lark that rises from the gates of night and pours its voice among the dying stars, seeing the sun behind the walls of the world. And the song of Lúthien released the bonds of winter, and the frozen waters spoke, and flowers sprang from the cold earth where her feet had passed. Then the spell of silence fell from Beren, and he called to her, crying Tunuviel, and the woods echoed the name. Then she halted in wonder and fled no more, and Beren came to her. But as she looked on him, doom fell upon her, and she loved him. Yet she slipped from his arms and vanished from his sight, even as the day was breaking. Then Beren lay upon the ground in a swoon, as one slain at once by bliss and grief, and he fell into a sleep, as it were an abyss of shadow. And waking he was as cold as stone, his heart barren and forsaken. And wandering in mind he groped as one that is stricken with sudden blindness, and seeks hands to grasp the vanished light. Thus he began the payment of anguish for the fate that was laid on him, and in his fate Lúthien was caught, and being immortal, she shared in his mortality, and being free received his chain, and her anguish was greater than any other of the Elderlay has known. Beyond his hope she returned to him where he sat in darkness, and long ago in the hidden kingdom she laid her hand in his. Thereafter often she came to him, and they went in secret the woods together from spring to summer, and no others of the children of Ilúvatar have had joy so great, though their time was brief. But Daedon, the minstrel, also loved Lúthien, and he espied her meetings with Beren, and betrayed them to Thingol. Then the king was filled with anger, for Lúthien he loved above all things, setting her above all the princes of the elves, whereas mortal men he did not even take into his service. Therefore he spoke in grief and amazement to Lúthien, but she would reveal nothing until he swore an oath to her that he would neither slay Beren nor imprison him. But he sent his servants to lay hands on him and led him to Menegroth as a malefactor. And Lúthien, forestalling them, led Beren herself before the throne of Thingol, as if he were an honoured guest. Then Thingol looked upon Beren in scorn and anger, but Melian was silent. "Who are you," said the king, "that come hither as a thief and unbidden dare to approach my throne?" But Beren, being filled with dread, for the splendour of Menegroth and the majesty of Thingol were very great, answered nothing. Therefore Lúthien spoke and said, "He is Beren, son of Barahir, lord of men, mighty foe of Morgoth, the tale of whose deeds is become a song even among the elves." "Let Beren speak," said Thingol. "What would you hear, unhappy mortal? And for what cause have you left your own land to enter this, which is forbidden to such as you? Can you show reason why my power should not be laid on you in heavy punishment for your insolence and folly?" Then Beren, looking up, beheld the eyes of Lúthien, and his glance went also to the face of Melian, and it seemed to him that words were put into his mouth. Fear left him, and the pride of the eldest house of men returned to him, and he said, "My fate, O king, led me hither, through perils such as few, even of the elves, would dare, and here I have found what I sought, not indeed, but finding I would possess forever. For it is above all gold and silver, and beyond all jewels. Neither rock, nor steel, nor the fires of Morgoth, nor all the powers of the elf kingdoms shall keep from me the treasure that I desire. For Lúthien, your daughter, is the fairest of all the children of the world." Then silence fell upon the hall, for those that stood there were astounded and afraid, and they thought that Beren would be slain. But Thingol spoke slowly, saying, "Death you have earned with those words, and death you should find suddenly, had I not sworn an oath in haste, of which I repent. Base-born mortal, who in the realm of Morgoth has learned to creep in secret as his spies and thralls." Then Beren answered, "Death you can give me earned or unearned, but the names I will not take from you of base-born, nor spy, nor thrall. By the ring of Felagund that he gave to Barahir, my father, on the battlefield of the north. My house has not earned such names from any elf, be he king or no." His words were proud, and all elves looked upon the ring, for he held it now aloft, and the green jewels gleamed there that the Nolder had devised in Valinor. But this ring was like two twin serpents, whose eyes were emeralds, and their heads met beneath a crown of golden flowers that the one upheld and the other devoured. That was the badge of Finarfin and his house. Then Melian leaned to Thingol's side, and in whispered counsel bade him forego his wrath. "For not by you," she said, "shall Beren be slain, and far free does his fate lead him in the end, yet it is wound with yours. Take heed." But Thingol looked in silence upon Lúthien, and he thought in his heart, "Unhappy men, children of little lords and brief kings, shall such as these lay hands on you, and yet live?" Then breaking his silence he said, "I see the ring, son of Barahir, and I perceive that you are proud and deem yourself mighty. But a father's deeds, even had his service been rendered to me, avail not to win the daughter of Thingol and Melian. See now, I too desire a treasure that is withheld, for rock and steel and the fires of Morgoth keep the jewel that I would possess against all the powers of the elf kingdoms. Yet I hear you say that bonds such as these do not daunt you. Go your way, therefore. Bring to me your hand a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown, and then if she will, Lúthien may set her hand in yours. Then you shall have my jewel, and though the fate of J.R.R. lie within the Silmarils, yet you shall hold me generous. Thus he wrought the doom of Doriath, and was ensnared within the curse of Mandos. And those that heard these words perceived that Thingol would save his oath, and yet send Beren to his death. For they knew that not all the power of the Noldor, before the siege was broken, had availed even to see from afar the shining Silmarils of Fëanor. For they were set in the Iron Crown, and treasured in Angband, above all wealth, and balrogs were about them, and countless swords and strong bars, and unassailable walls, and the dark majesty of Morgoth. But Beren laughed. For little price, he said, do elven kings sell their daughters, for gems and things made by craft? But if this be your will, Thingol, I will perform it, and when we meet again, my hand shall hold a Silmaril from the Iron Crown. For you have not looked the last upon Beren, son of Barahir. Then he looked in the eyes of Melian, who spoke not, and he bade farewell to Lúthien de Nuviel, and bowing before Thingol and Melian, he put aside the guards about him, and departed from Menegroth alone. Then at last Melian spoke, and she said to Thingol, O king, you have devised cunning counsel, but if my eyes have not lost their sight, it is ill for you, whether Beren fail in his errand or achieve it. For you have doomed either your daughter or yourself, and now in Doriath drawn within the fate of a mightier realm. But Thingol answered, I sell not to elves or men those whom I love and cherish above all treasure. And if there were hope or fear that Beren should come ever back alive to Menegroth, he should have looked again upon the light of heaven, though I had sworn it. But Lúthien was silent, and from that hour she sang not again in Doriath. A brooding silence fell upon the woods, and the shadows lengthened in the kingdom of Thingol. It is told in the Lay of Leithien that Beren passed through Doriath unhindered, and came at length to the region of the twilight meres and the fens of Sidion, and leaving Thingol's land, he climbed the hills above the falls of Sidion, where the river plunged underground with great noise. Thence he looked westward through the mists and rains that lay upon the hills. He saw Talaf Dirnen, the guarded plain stretching between Sidion and Narog, and beyond he descried afar the highlands of Taur en Faroth, that rose above Nargothrond. And being destitute without hope or counsel, he turned his feet thither. Upon all the plains the elves of Nargothrond kept unceasing watch, and every hill upon its borders was crowned with hidden towers, and through all its woods and fields archers ranged secretly and with great craft.